Fury back today. Today we're with a slightly different episode. Today the challenge for myself is to essentially talk through how to run various exports and saves in Draft Day Sports Pro Football 20 for the CSFL League. So for those of you watching, hopefully you're CSFL GMs, and hopefully this will give you a bit of a guide to run your exports, check they're okay after a sim has been run, and hopefully just some tips and things to make sure that when you do export a file to the league for a sim, that your depth chart or your strategy doesn't get reset essentially. But before we begin and talk about that, the actual in-game mechanics, the first thing I wanted to do was to make everyone aware of the first thing you should kind of do before you even begin setting a depth chart and strategies in game, and that is to simply check that you are running the right version of Draft Day Sports Pro Football 20. And the easiest way to do that is to simply load the game and to check that you are running the correct version. So you can see here from an image that I loaded up earlier, I've circled it in red just here. That the version that I'm running at the moment is 4.0.3, and that is consistent with the CSFL League version that they're running as well. So if you're not on that version and you do need to get that version and update your Draft Day Sports, it's very, very simple to do. You essentially just go to the Wolverine Studios forum, and I'll bring an image up in a minute so you can see this, and simply download the latest version. So if we just quickly flip screens here, we should be able to see that in 1 second. So you can see here, this is the Wolverine Studios forum. Very simple, Wolverine Studios /board. And if you go down to the Pro Football 20 general discussion, and that loads up, you can see here at the top there is a pinned icon which is current version. If you click into there, you can very simply scroll down to the correct version, which the latest one at the moment is 4.0.3. And if you click that link, it'll bring up an installer, and you simply just run through the installer, and then you're up to date, and then you are ready to load the league and run some exports. So if we do that now, we're just going to have to very quickly get into game here. So the way you load the game up, very simple, load it up. They'll bring an option up which says load online league, and there's a URL which is on the forum, which I'll show you now, which you just simply type in, and the game should load. So let's bring up that URL for you to see. So you can see it's just here, but it's pretty straightforward. Football.champions sim league /league CSFL.bin. And if you load that into the game at the start, it'll bring up your league file. So let's actually log into the game here and bring up the correct screen. Okay, so you should hopefully see the log on screen now. A little bit of moving around. The first thing that will come up is if you click into the office icon here, they'll come up with a log on button, and you simply click that, type in your team password, and then you're logged on. And the way you can tell that you are logged on is very simple. You should be able to see this export button. If you can't see this export button and there is still a log on button there, then you haven't logged in properly. Either your password hasn't worked or you haven't got to that stage yet. So if you hit any errors at that point, contact one of the admin team and they'll be able to check your password with you to make sure you've got the right one. So the next thing to do is to probably have a look at, let's look at some rosters management first. So I guess that's probably the key thing at the moment for the league in terms of making sure that everyone gets to the right roster level and move their team around. So it's very simple to do. If you go to the roster icon on the team menu and hit roster management, it will come up with a set of boxes that essentially looks like this. So you can see at the moment the Detroit Lions have 59 active players, and it clearly says that they need 53. Obviously, you can have up to 5 players in your practice squad, so you can move players around there. But essentially, for starting regular season, you have to have 53 active players. Anyone else either has to be in the practice squad, in the injury reserve list if they are actually injured, or they have to be cut. So the way you can check a couple of things to help you with roster management in terms of what positions you need as minimum, who you've got in what positions, you can simply just click on this view position count. And this will bring up your current number of players you've got at particular positions and your minimum number of players that you need in order to make your 53-man rotation. So you can see here the Detroit Lions have a crazy amount of cornerbacks for some reason, but everyone else is pretty much at minimum. We've got an extra kicker for some reason, and you can see here there's a couple of safety challenges here. So simple thing to do, gives you a quick snapshot of your roster and who you might want to cut, who you might want to move, and also who you might want to move in terms of positions. So before we talk about position changes, the way you simply move people across here is you just hit the buttons down the bottom here to move practice or move to injury reserve. If you want to cut a player, you can also do that at this screen by hitting this X button, and you'll see it'll bring up this option and you simply click OK. Obviously I'm not going to do that at the moment because I haven't set any roster numbers at the moment, but you can pretty much do everything in this screen in terms of your roster management. The only thing you can't do directly from the screen is the position changes. So the way you can do that is simply, again, kind of from the screen, you can click on a player and it'll bring up their ratings initially. If you go into the player bio section, you'll see here there's a change position. So this is where you can change a player's position by simply selecting the drop down and changing it, and then just cancelling out. So you'll see here, if I want to change Felton to a running back, I have done that here. I can change him to a wide receiver if I necessarily want to. And hopefully, if I just go back in to my roster management screen up here, so you can see Felton here is then changed to a wide receiver from, I think it was initially a fullback possibly. So it's very simple to do from there. Nothing else you necessarily need to do here in terms of actually saving what you do, because when you run the export for roster management, saves and things will happen with that. You don't need to save anything else on this screen really. Same goes for if you're cutting players. You can cut players either here or in the actual roster screen. Under the contract section, you can just release a player, cut a player here. But for me, I find it easier going into the roster management and tweaking everything there, because you can kind of see everything. You can go, oh, okay, I need an extra wide receiver, for example. Okay, what positions can play wide receiver? Who can I change positions? It's all on that screen. That's where I find it easiest. So that's kind of the roster management aspect out of the way. Let's move on to the depth chart. which I think has been causing a few issues for some general managers. So this is your depth chart screen. You've got a couple of options here. So you can view your offense, defense, special teams. Pretty straightforward. You can do drop downs for who you want to be starting in the rotation, probably on the bench. You can select all this yourself. The important thing to do is, so for example, if I were to change my wide receiver from Calvin Johnson to, let's say, Morris here, we're going to have a running back as our first option wide receiver. Why not? So the important thing to do here is to make sure you hit the save package button. So if I don't hit the save package button, say for example I jump to here and I jump back, you can see the change has not happened. Same if I go to here and I flick to defense and offense, you see it changes back there. So I'll just do that again because it went fairly quick. So if I put Morris back in at wide receiver 1, I go to my defense and I go, oh, okay, I've got to set my depth chart here. I go back to my offense, you can see it resets. So the important thing for depth chart management is when you're happy with a particular depth chart, your offense, your defense, your special teams, before you do anything else and change any other pages, make sure you hit the save package button, which is up here on the top right. So for example, let's say I actually want to put Morris in that wide receiver. I hit the save package, you'll get a saved icon come up. Now if I change from defense back to offense, you can see he's there. And the same if I click onto another screen and I click back, he's still there. So that's the important thing. For every single time you make any changes to a particular drop down in the depth chart, be it offense, defense, special teams, do not change the screen you are on. Make sure you hit the save package icon first. It's really important. Otherwise, you could spend lots of time setting your depth chart, go to another screen, and it'll all completely reset. So that's my key tip there. So let's move on to the strategy section. So you can see here that first thing that pops up is the team strategy. So you can set all this however you want. So let's say, for example, I want to change this. Let's go to pass and make it a really aggressive offensive strategy. Same thing applies here. So if I were to click off here and click back, you can see it's reset. So again, key thing to do here, there we go, is to hit the save and activate button before you change any screens again. Same thing applies as well, similar to the depth chart. If I were to go to, for example, the playbook and were to go back, you can see it's reset again. So again, it's important that when you're making changes that you hit this save and activate button on every single page you're on for team strategy as well. So we make those changes, we hit save and activate, you'll see it comes up with game plan saved. So now that aggressive and pass, regardless of where I click to, so if I click to a couple of different screens here, and I click back, you'll see that that's stayed the same. So again, similar to depth chart, make sure the offense and defense on your team strategy, any changes you make on this page here, make sure you hit save and activate before you change to anything else. And the exact same thing applies to the playbook itself. So let's say I want to make some tweaks to this playbook. I want to play my starters. I want to, I don't know, let calendar run my defense, and I'm going to play my 1st and 10. Let's say I'm going to be pass heavy on 1st and 10, 100, why not? So same thing applies. If I were to, perhaps not go to that one. If I were to go to another page and we were to click back into the playbook, you can see it's been reset again. Okay, So you can see here it's changed back to 61. It's still playing my backups, and I don't have calendar as my defensive play caller. So if I want to set this again, I need to make sure that I make the changes I want on this screen. Let's play the starters, and I hit save all changes. That way, again, if I were to click off and click back into the playbook, you'll see that my changes have been saved here. So key thing really with any depth chart changes, any playbook changes, any team strategy changes, that when you are on those screens, if there is a save button, which they all have, make sure you hit that save button before you change to any other screens on the game. Otherwise it will reset. And it means when you go to exporting, and if you're wondering why a depth chart hasn't been loaded, or a playbook or a team strategy hasn't been loaded, chances are it's probably because you didn't hit the save button before you change screen. So it's really key. In terms of customized playbooks, I'll be honest with you, I haven't really used this a lot, so I don't necessarily know the ins and outs of how it works. As far as I know, you come into here, you make your playbook, whichever it is. We need to put in a minimum number of runs quickly, and a minimum number of passes. Let's put some passing quickly so we can create a playbook. I think we might need a couple more. As far as I know, the playbook will then save, providing you hit the export button. If you hit the export button, it'll put that playbook in, and I believe you can. It then should be fine. Not 100% sure that that's accurate or not, because again, I haven't used it yet. So when I do find out how to use it, and I feel confident enough to use my own custom playbook, I will let you know, and probably do another video on that anyway, on how you can set up a custom playbook. But that kind of covers the main things in terms of things you'll want to do before a sim, in terms of roster management, setting a depth chart, getting your strategy and playbook right, and making all the saves there. So once you've done everything and you've saved it all in the various locations, the last thing to do is to come back to the home button, the office button even, not the home button, the office button, and just hit export team. So as soon as you hit export team, you'll get a pop-up that comes up saying, I believe it's either export successful or export complete. If that comes up, then your export has been loaded into the forum server, I think essentially into the game server. And when the simmer comes around to running it, it'll be running there and it should be fine. So fingers crossed. So the other thing to do is, so you've done all of that, you've had your simmer happen, and you want to check if your export has been loaded successfully. So it's a very simple thing to do, and I'll show you how to do that. So what you'll want to do is you want to go to the HTML on the league. Just work out which one I have HTML loaded up. Just believe it's this one. There we go. It goes to HTML, and you'll easily hit the standings page. If you go to this league button up the top and go down to league owners and open it, you can see instantly who the league owners are for each team, GMs for each team, and you'll see here when the last export was. So, and it will show you whether it was a successful export or not, or whether it was invalid. So you'll get a successful one, providing you've uploaded it in the last sim, and it was with the right file version, everything. You'll get invalid key or old export. Say for example, you loaded your depth chart for game 1, week 1, and then week 2, game 2. You didn't set a depth chart, you haven't uploaded anything, you haven't exported anything. That's when you'll get this old invalid key export. The other thing that you could possibly get is the DDS PF version mismatch. So this was what I was talking about at the beginning, where the version of the game that you have is not consistent with the version the league is running. And I showed you at the beginning how to change that. So key thing to be aware is that this last export is not live. You can't click export and then come here and check whether it's been successful or not. This will only update as the HTML updates, which will be on every sim. So you'll see in here the previous export you will have sent in, whether it's been successful or not. And I believe that covers everything that you kind of need to know in terms of how to export depth charts and make roster management changes and playbooks and how to check everything is working correctly. Hopefully this helps you in terms of preparing your team for week one, and for future depth chart changes that you like to make. So hopefully it helps, and best of luck with your time and journey in the CSFL.